Hey everybody, it's Miss Carr here. So this week we are talking about transformations. Before we get there, I just want to do a quick review of what we looked at last week. So last week we talked about parent function equations, okay? Previously we had done graphs. This week is kind of tying both of those ideas together. So here is the list of all of your parent function equations. You have a linear, quadratic, absolute value, radical or square root, and rational. You'll notice that I have underlined 3 of those functions. That's because I'm really going to focus and mostly only use these 3. So I want us really to focus in on our quadratic, that's when you see the degree of 2, the absolute value, that's when you see those bars on either side, and our radical, that's when you see your square root. Okay, you need to know those parent equations. I would strongly suggest that you get out a notebook at this point in time and you write down at the very least those 3 equations. As we go through this video, there's going to be some other things that you're going to want to write down. You can use these on your assessment. So grab a piece of paper, make sure you're ready for that assessment. All right, here we go. So we did our recap of our parent functions. We are also going to hear some new vocabulary this week. So the big one that we talked about is transformation. And what exactly does that mean in math? Essentially, a transformation is when you take any graph and you move it on the coordinate plane. So any type of movement or adjustment on our graph. That could mean we're moving it up or down, left or right. We could be flipping it. We could be stretching it. Anything that changes the graph from its original, that is a transformation. Okay, and so I've put movement here, and this is something you could write down. And then these 2, hopefully we know what these words mean, but if we don't, just quick recap. You're going to hear me say vertical a lot. Vertical just means up and down, and horizontal, that just means left and right. Okay, so in this video, we're really just going to focus on vertical first. Okay, so we're going to focus on our up and down movement. All right, let me grab my next board. Here we are. So, there are 2 ways we can adjust our graph. Obviously, if we're talking about vertical motion, we said that's up or down. So I can either move my graph up or I can move it down. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to write my original equation. And if I want to move it up, we're going to add a number at the end. If I want to move it down, we're going to subtract a number at the end. Okay, and I would strongly suggest that you copy down this board, actually, really, in your notes. So what that means, this is great and all, but what that means, let's say that this is my original graph, and I have a vertical transformation upward. Let's say I have a vertical transformation of positive 3. That means that I would take my original graph and I'd be moving it up 3 places. And I apologize for my drawing skills here. Okay, so that would be a vertical transformation up 3. Now let's say that instead of adding some numbers at the end, I subtract some numbers. Let's say I subtract 4. That means I would have a vertical transformation down of 4. So I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4. And that would be my new graph. And again, sorry for my drawing skills. And now I'm not expecting you guys to draw these new graphs. I just need you to recognize which transformation is occurring. So let's take a look at how we can do that. I have 3 examples that I'm going to go through with you. All right. And again, if you have a piece of paper, which you should, write these down. You can use these examples on your assessment. So let's say I'm given this, f of x equals x squared minus 1. The first thing you're going to want to do is try and recognize a parent function. So hopefully at this point you have that list of parent functions written down. We can see that x squared, that was one of those original function families that we talked about. That was a quadratic. So the way that I've changed this from just x squared, I now have a minus 1 at the end. This means, according to my rule, that I went down 1. I just minused 1. All right. Let's look at my second example. So now I don't have a quadratic. We're still looking for that parent function though. And hopefully we can see it at this point. I am looking, here is that parent function that I hopefully recognize. This is an absolute value parent function. And the way that I've changed it, I don't just have this anymore. I now have something else at the end. I have a plus 5. And since it's at the end, that means that we're talking about vertical transformation. And since it's added, that means we're going up. So I now have a shift of up 5. All right, one more. I don't have a quadratic or an absolute value. This time I actually have a radical or a square root. Okay, that's one of those other parent functions that I said we would focus on. And I'm subtracting at the end, which means that we're talking about vertical down motion. So I have a transformation of down 6. Okay. So those are 3 different examples, and you can expect similar questions on an assessment. In the next video, we'll talk about horizontal shift. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thanks.